Calvin Ridley has had one of the most interesting last few years in NFL history, from gambling to now being reinstated. So how did we get here in the first place?
All receivers out, Schaub throwing deep in the end zone, and it's caught by Ridley!
Back in late '94, Calvin was born in good old Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and grew up with football in his DNA. Funny enough, he played in the same Pop Warner League as eventual NFL stars Lamar Jackson and Hollywood Brown in the Pompano Beach area, only a few miles from where he'd eventually go to high school at Monarch. During his time with the Knights, Calvin did his thing year after year as not just one of the best receivers in the state, but one of the very best in the country, even though he had missed part of his senior season due to Florida age restriction rules since he was nearly 20 years old. Nonetheless, in his time at Monarch, Calvin was about as impressive as it gets, so it wasn't a shock that he was a 5-star recruit out of high school, with every team across the country interested. But eventually, just like a lot of other superstar wideouts, he decided on the good old Crimson Tide. Unlike most other top prospects out of high school, and even though he was on one of, if not the most stacked teams in college football, Calvin was still able to get his work in as a true freshman. Usually the first year for most players in college is their worst statistically, but Calvin started off strong from the very get-go with a super impressive over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns as a freshman. I made hundreds of these videos, and this is the very first one where anyone got even remotely close to 1,000, so the fact that Calvin put up nearly 1050 is nearly unheard of. So with all this in mind, the freshman All-American nod was inevitable, and upon that he was second team All-Conference, which along with the national championship win is about as rare as it gets for a true freshman. After such an impressive true freshman season for Calvin, the hype was next level going into his sophomore year, but although he was able to put up over 1,000 the previous season, his production took a bit of a dip, with this time just under 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, and yet he was still able to make the All-SEC second team, although rough enough, Bama didn't win a natty that year. Following 2 solid seasons with the Crimson Tide, it seemed inevitable that Calvin's junior year would be his last, so I'm sure he was looking to do his thing once again, and although it's easier said than done, I would say that his nearly 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns on a career best 15 yards per catch was able to do that and much more as Calvin solidified himself as one of the top wide receiver prospects in the draft. After a great career in Tuscaloosa and his second natty win in 3 years, Calvin decided to forego his senior season and declare for the NFL draft in what was a pretty decent class, with guys like Cortland Sutton, Christian Kirk, and DJ Moore in the mix. But let's just say that Calvin was pretty much the cream of the crop, so it wasn't all that big a surprise that he went early off the board.
The Atlanta Falcons select Calvin Ridley, wide receiver, Alabama.
Sorry to stop the video, but since you're here, it'd be awesome if you could subscribe, like, turn on post notifications, and comment down below what you think Calvin is going to do in Jacksonville. But anyways, back to the video. Calvin was taken 26th overall by the Falcons and signed a 4-year, $10 million deal to stay with the Birds through 22. But nonetheless, considering his impressive production at Bama, expectations were pretty high, although not out of this world simply because this dude was on the same team.
Ryan steps through it, throws on the run, and Jones with a catch!
Another former Bama stud in Julio Jones had already established himself as one of the best receivers in the NFL with the Falcons, so it gave Calvin the opportunity to do his thing from the start. And just like in Tuscaloosa, my man was on timing from the jump.
Ryan deep downfield, and it is Ridley for the catch and the touchdown!
It's one thing to play well as a true freshman at Bama, but a whole nother to do the same in the league. But let's just say that Calvin is one of those guys, and so he was able to put up over 800 yards and 10 touchdowns as only a rookie. Not too shabby of a season for someone who is new to the whole NFL thing, and upon that, historic, as Calvin broke a Falcons rookie record with 10 touchdowns through the year, along with leading all rookie receivers in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. So it only made sense that he was named to the Pro Football Writers All-Rookie team. Just like back at Bama, many thought that it would be difficult for Calvin to follow up his pretty dang impressive rookie performance. But even though there's this whole sophomore slump thing, and even though Calvin missed 3 games, he was still able to put up nearly 900 yards and 7 touchdowns. By this point, if anyone thought that his first year was a fluke, his sophomore production proved that he was no joke. So going into 2020, I'm sure Calvin was looking to take his game up a notch. And let's just say that he did quite a bit more than that.
Goal off the fake to Curley. Ryan going deep for Ridley. He makes the catch.
That season, Calvin didn't just put up his best statistical season in Atlanta, but his best since high school, with this time nearly 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns on a career best 15 yards per catch, as he was named second team All-Pro, but didn't make a Pro Bowl because his bud and Julio Jones took the spot. Nonetheless, Calvin proved that he was not just good, but one of the best receivers in football. And so going into 2021, many were curious about whether or not Calvin could keep the good times rolling. Since the Falcons exercised their fifth-year option on good old Mr. Ridley, it seemed like Calvin was going to be in Atlanta the rest of the year, but something was just off about him that season, and so eventually Calvin announced that he would be stepping away from football midway through the year due to mental health issues. And even though it's become a major part of sports, and upon that society as a whole in the last few years, stepping away for an entire season was next to unheard of, so it must have been a necessity for someone who is quickly becoming one of the best receivers in the league.
Jones not there, going deep up top. Instead is Ryan, and he's got the completion.
Following the break, you would think that Calvin would be fired up to return in 22, and upon that potentially have a career year now that Julio was gone, but it turns out that he wasn't even given the chance.
That man is Calvin Ridley. You're not going to see him play football this year.
On March 7, 2022, the NFL announced that Calvin would be suspended throughout at least the end of the 2022 season for betting on games the previous year, including his own team, and so he had to forfeit his $11 million salary, and upon that missed his second season in a row.
Falcons are trading Calvin Ridley to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Whoa!
Although it was midway through a suspended season for Calvin, the Falcons traded him to the Jaguars for conditional 6th and 4th round picks, which eventually became 5th and a potential 2nd rounder due to certain conditions in the contract. Fast forward to February of 23, and on his first day eligible for reinstatement, Calvin applied, and then was officially accepted a few weeks later on March 6th. Since he has only just been accepted the day that I'm writing this, I have no idea how well he'll play in Jacksonville, but based on his play in Atlanta, I think the sky's the limit for his production. Although there may not be a Julio on the Jags, there's more than enough talent across the offense to give Calvin the opportunity to get back in the groove without the weight of the team on his shoulders. Considering that he hasn't played in nearly 2 full seasons, rust is inevitable, even for someone as talented as Calvin. But since the Jaguars were able to make the playoffs without him, and upon that have another offseason to develop, I think Jacksonville could be the perfect spot for Calvin to become a superstar once again.
Hesitates, fires, catch made, Calvin Ridley, touchdown Falcons!
Since good old Clemson alum Trevor Lawrence is going into his 3rd year as a starter, you can only imagine that his game will be that much better than it was the previous season. So considering that he's coming off a Pro Bowl appearance in 22, if Trevor is able to take his game to another level this year, Jacksonville could have one of the best offenses in football before you know it. But here's the thing, it's not only just Trevor and Calvin. There are also studs like Zay, Evan, Christian, and of course Travis. So as long as they all stay healthy and keep doing their thing, I don't see any reason why the Jaguars couldn't dominate week after week, especially in a division that leaves a lot to be desired.
Protected as Ryan throws for granted, and that ball is intercepted. Another pick thrown.
Nonetheless, Calvin is in a great spot in Jacksonville, so even though he's going to have a lot of rust, I think that he'll be back in no time. But anyways, what do you guys think? Is Calvin really going to be a superstar once again, or was that all just in the past? Comment down below your thoughts. Calvin Ridley was a dog in high school, college, and now in the league, so even though he may have lost some momentum after what happened the past few years, I doubt that it will keep him from doing his thing once again.
Now they back off, and Ryan hits Ridley. Oh, what a move, Calvin Ridley! Look at this!
Thanks for watching the video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to subscribe, like, turn on post notifications, and comment down below your thoughts. But anyways, see you all soon, and have a good rest of your day.